After e4, e6, knight c3, d5, knight f3, bishop g4. This is what we're looking at in this video. h3 comes immediately. In this video, we're going to go through bishop takes and now queen f3. So we're gonna see a few things we haven't seen from previous videos. Mainly, we went through e6, bishop e2, knight f6, and how to carry on from there. So let's go through this. Let's go just for a second. Let's go through e6 immediately. This is the most boring variation, and it's annoying because you can't really take this pawn without helping black's improvement of the center. You can't develop this bishop to anywhere active. It's gonna have to be bishop e2, which is a perfectly fine move. It's the best move. But here our opponent is tempting us to play something like e5 or maybe d4 or d3. They're all wrong. You have to play bishop e2 here. Just go on. When you see this type of pawn structure, you don't want to take. You don't want to allow the opponent any swaps. What you want is your opponent to take you so you can take back. So here's because we have already seen quite a lot of stuff from here, we're going to see two lines we haven't seen at all. One of them is this one, d4 immediately. Since now we don't have the e2 square for the knight, we're going to have to play knight b1. But this is all fine, because now black doesn't have our attack over the pawn e4 anymore. So let's go on, for example, knight f6, castle. Knight d7, normal developing moves. d3, that's how you're going to play. And now you've basically got the bishop pair, and you carry on this game. Knight e5 with an attack on the queen. We responded with queen to g3 attacking the knight. Bishop can't develop because we're putting pressure on g7. We're going to go to g7. It's perfectly safe to do so. e4 to g6, f4. And f4 was going to come anyway. It's thematic. Queen to c7, pinning the f4 pawn. Knight to d2. And here you're already winning. White has an idea of playing queen to f2 and then c3. Our king is completely safe. After c3, we're going to be able to take the central pawn and open the c file. When the knight moves, go to c4 or maybe f3. It's up to you, literally. You can play the bishop and then the rook is coming to the c file. And our opponent can never really castle safely on the king side because you can play f5. It's just too strong. And here, even if our opponent gets to, let's say here, we skip the move, but even if we play c3 and then c5, you still want to take. Take. That's it. You're completely fine. This is an amazing center. White's idea now is to play bishop to d1 and then play the bishop on this diagonal. So this is the plan we're looking for, right? Queen f2 and so on. Here, let's see what is, for example, black plays bishop e7, right? Okay, the plan goes on, queen f2. And after black castles, do we still need to play c3 now? Here the best move is actually g3. Because obviously c3 was the best move earlier when I was mentioning the plan, because our opponent might have chosen the castle long side. Since he chose to castle this side, now we play the familiar pattern, king to g2, and then the rook will be able to come on the h file where the king is, and the center is quite closed, so we don't have to worry. We're going to have to start pushing the side pawns. All our opponent's pieces are on the king side, that's true, but they're all going to be removed from there. So let's make an example, c5 to protect the pawn in d4, because now the pawn in d4 is actually being attacked because the black player still has two attackers over f4. Okay, h4. We attack on the side. And now h5 doesn't work because the only defender of h5 is this knight. So you can kick it away with e5. But the thing is, if black hadn't played h5, we were going to do so. So h5 kind of had to happen. Now you can argue, okay, the knight can go to g4. Okay, but now you take. And now queen to e2. This pawn is very weak. White is in a much better situation, so let's gonna leave it there and take this from the start. Bishop g4, h3. Take. Okay, and now e6. There's another thing that has to be seen. So bishop e2, knight f6, castle, and after bishop to d6, this is the move that needs to be seen. This was the second variation I mentioned before. How do we go on now? Okay, a few forcing moves here. d4. We're attacking e5, so we're going to make a fork. This is forcing our opponent to either step back, give us a lot of space, and especially now that the g7 is a weaker pawn, if the bishop were to go back, then you could attack the knight. Queen g3 will be a very, very strong move. We've seen patterns like that in the past. So this is forcing black to take us. This is the best move. Okay, knight takes back, and now knight d7 to protect this knight can't happen because you can take the bishop for free. So there's a priority going on here. If black castles, for instance, then this is really bad because this is actually a good bishop for our opponent. I mean, it's an open game, so we're just gonna swap. Queen takes back, and now rook to d1 is the best move to defend the pawn. There's absolutely no reason for black to play like that because we're going to an endgame with an open endgame with bishop pair. There's not many things that these two knights can do. They're undeveloped and the game is open against the bishop pair, so that's really bad. Let's look at this line. Okay, let's say knight to d7, a4. You're gonna stop b5 from happening. Okay, rook e8 with the possibility of playing knight f8, knight g6. The typical Caro-Kann moves. a5. Remember that we are interested in swapping stuff. Let's actually look at this knight d5. Just so you know, this is met with the usual c4. And knight b4 isn't really a problem here because of the familiar queen to b3. And you're threatening to play bishop d2 and win that knight. That knight can't really be defended by a pawn. And in this position, if instead of knight, I mean, you know how to deal with knight d5, that kind of move. You play knight f8, this type of plan. Develop the bishop, bishop f4. Queen goes back. Is met with bishop to e5. We are interested in taking that knight and the pawn, obviously, that comes with it, or smash the pawn structure. If instead our opponent actually goes to d5, obviously our swap would be favorable for black. White's best move is pawn to a6, and after b6, well, in this case, let's just play queen to e3 and threaten moves like c4, bishop f3. So let's go from the start and see something we haven't seen. Knight f, bishop g4, h3, take, take, and now the early knight f6. Okay, bishop e2 comes, and we're not going to go through e6 because we've seen enough. So here's a few options. So knight d7, by the way, can't happen because you got double attack, I mean triple attack on it. So it's a free pawn and there's absolutely no reason, there's just nothing, there's no such a move. So let's explore something new. Let's start with d4. We've seen something similar before, right? We have to play knight b1. It's not the exact same because now black will have some option like e6 or e5. e5, how do we deal with this? Castle. And after development, let's say bishop e7. Bishop d6 doesn't make much sense. d3. Castle. See, starting to recognize the pattern, and queen g3 comes, puts pressure on g7. Knight b to d7 developing. a4. You see knight d7, play a4. Because you know that the knight might try to go to b6. It's not like it's doing much in this specific opening, but rook e8, h4. This is the plan. The center is closed. Black decided to close it. And when the center is closed, you attack on the side. Bishop f8 to put more defense over the g7 square. Knight to d2 developing, just like before. Knight to c5, how do we deal with this? The idea is obviously to go to e6 because from there the knight will be much stronger. Knight to c4 comes now. And now knight e6, you can just take this pawn. And you can take it no matter what. Let's say b5, like any move, whatever. Knight e5 is perfectly safe to happen. It's an extremely strong move. It takes the opponent's center. So let's look at bishop d6, protecting that square. Okay, h5, carry on. b5, kicking away our beautiful knight. We take the bishop. Queen takes back. h6, forcing g6. f4, recognize the pattern. We've seen it before in the variation with d4 and knight b1. You can play f4 because our opponent does no longer have an attack over e4. So e4 is solid and it's going to stay there forever. This pawn chain is safe. No reason not to break it with f4. Okay, knight f to d7, and now our opponent is ready to protect the king side. Take. Take. Bishop d2. a5. These are all best moves, but still. You take here in e5. Knight takes. Rook takes a5. We've gone past the 20th move, so I'm going to have to stop the line there. We're completely winning. We got the bishop pair. Position evaluated around +2. This is our opponent playing only computer moves all the way to move 20 in a faulty variation. So that tells you how this early d4 move attacking the knight, loosening up the center, is not going anywhere. It's a bad move. Further example to prove my point might be seen from this variation now. h3, take, knight f6, bishop e2, and now d4 attacking the knight. Knight b1, b1, and earlier we went through a5. Let's look at e6, just in case it changes anything. No, d3, c5. Because what else? I mean, look, if instead of c5, black plays bishop d6. Okay, knight d2, starting to recognize the patterns. Castle, h4, knight d7, the same things will happen. Queen to h3, this is the best move in this position. Knight to c5, a3, a5. Okay, knight f3 is coming. In this case, we didn't play f4. Did you notice that? We didn't play because there is no pawn in e5. We're not really breaking anything with f4. And we haven't really decided what side we're going to castle yet. So if we decide to castle this, or we might not decide to castle at all. So f4, there's no reason to play it now. Besides, the knight in f3 is putting pressure on d4. And also threatening a fork in e5. So after bishop to c7, we can't really take this pawn because of the queen. And we can't really do the fork. Okay, g4. And this is unstoppable. You can't just play h6 because you'll just play g5 no matter what, and you're completely winning. Let's say knight to e8. Okay, g5. If black plays g6, then you play h5, and that's it. As soon as you take, you're going for h7. And in this position, what if f5 instead of g6, for example? Okay, well, take en passant. Queen takes back. Looks like our opponent has put up a good defense on the king, but still, he played bishop g5. Queen can't move to g6 because of bishop to e7. Attacking the rook here and the knight in c5. What if queen goes to f7? Okay, h5. h6. Situation is desperate, but now you play bishop to c1. There are no sacrifices there. Best move by black will be bishop to f4, removing our unbelievable, taking our very strong bishop pair. Okay, take. These are the best moves. Okay, e5 comes now. Beautiful move. Stops knight d6 and knight f6. So knight to c7, maybe going to d5. Okay, rook to g1. Knight to d5. Rook to g4. This is gonna happen no matter what. Queen to f7. King to d2 is the best move. Knight to f4. Queen to g3. And eventually we're gonna play rook to g1, and we never have to worry about the g pawn pushing because we have the h pawn that will take it. Knight takes pawn in h5. Looks like we just lost the pawn. No, queen to h2 attacks the knight. Well, the knight is protected, but the file now completely open, so we're trying to play rook h1. Knight back to f4. Queen takes h6. Knight taking here. We don't even care. Rook to h1, going for mate. Queen check. This is the best move by black. You take, and now black takes back with the knight. This is all a computer move to try and resist. Queen h8, king f7. But now knight to g5. But now knight to g5 should make things much easier. This is just because the engine doesn't resign. So once again from the start, bishop g4, h3, take, knight f6, bishop e2, d4. They play this move because our square e2 is taken. Okay, well, knight b1, c5, e6. This is what we're looking at, not e5. d3, c5. So instead of bishop d6, we're going through c5. We're going to only look at one line from here so we can move on to the next topic. Queen to g3 is a great move because it stops the development of the bishop. So if your opponent doesn't develop the bishop as he did in the previous variation, just play queen g3 and you're stopping it. g6 here is a weakness on the dark square. You're just going to go on and castle. Bishop g7 you can say, but no, bishop to g5 is too strong. We're threatening e5, so after queen to b6, not getting pinned, knight d2. The pawn is poisoned, obviously. I mean, you're gonna go to the 7th rank, you're completely winning. So castle can finally happen. a4, typical in the Caro-Kann. Knight d7, knight c4, attacking the queen. Queen c6. Remember, queen d8, you could play e5. Okay. f4. h6, attacking the bishop. How do we respond? Take. Bishop to f3. Slowly improving our position. Queen to d7 is the best move because we're threatening e5, attacking the knight. The knight will have to go to d5, but it's really uncomfortable. a5. Rook a to b8. e5. Knight d5, you can just take it. And after queen takes back, you're wondering, why did we give that bishop for the knight? Well, because the center is quite closed. So h4, king to h7, familiar move. The idea is to be able to play the rook on the g file, obviously. That makes perfect sense. h5 comes. And now all the swaps are favorable for white. Remember, you're always going to be able to play knight d6. Anyway, if black takes us, the idea of playing rook to g8. Okay, well, f5 is coming. This is getting really dangerous. Rook to g8. Queen h2, attacking the pawn. f6. These are all best moves by black. Okay, queen h3. This is our best move. We might be able to produce a strong pass pawn. Okay, pawn takes in e5. f6. If that's what black decide to do, decide to open the center, we're going to play f6, attacking the bishop. Bishop to h8. f7. Rook to f8. Knight to d2. And when the knight goes to a4, it's completely game over. Queen to d7, double attack on that pawn. Queen to h5. Black is on borrowed time. One more thing we're going to look at before we close this video. So bishop g4, h3, take. And the early knight f6, bishop e2. Let's look at g6 already. The early g6. This is met with h4. And this is now some sort of, the usual attack against the modern defense or against the Pirts. The bishop goes in Fenketen and you keep going with the pawn. But the funny thing is the other pawn doesn't have the light square bishop, so you can play g4 and then h5. The center is not really closed. Of course, it's not closed, but you can close it if you want. And this attack on the side might encourage black to swap the central pawn, which is good for us. So let's look at this move now, h5, which stops the whole thing. Well, e5. Knight to g4, d4. We close the file, we close the center. Now after bishop g7, bishop to g5. This is very close, very similar to such scenario like when you play against the Pirts. Castle. Queen to d3, allowing an attack on the knight. Knight to h6, we will obviously love to take that knight. Knight to h6. Queen e2, double attack on the knight. And that knight can't just be defended with king h7, it's a bad move because now g4. And now here obviously if knight takes, you take, pawn takes, you push the pawn, you're swapping everything. If f6, counter-attacking our bishop. Okay, ignore it. Just play pawn takes h5. And when you lose the piece, take here with check. King cannot take because, I mean, it's an absolute disaster. Especially after bishop d3 check, have a queen g5 check. They're all terrible moves, terribly strong moves. So king g8, take here with the pawn. Knight f5, f4. A move like knight to g3 seems to me making sense, but bishop g4 is just too strong. You're threatening bishop e6, and yeah, there's no coming back here. Then I can't just go back. You're also threatening queen to h2. So this is a bad move. Okay, let's go on. Let's say b5 instead of knight g3. Long castle. b4 attacking the knight, bishop g4. Completely careless of the fact that this pawn can take the knight with an attack on our queen. But this is very simple though. We have removed the bishop from e2, so now we're threatening to go to h2, and that's gonna be it. Queen e8, attacking this pawn. Knight e2. Queen takes pawn g6. Queen d3. And we're going to be applying so much pressure over that knight in f5. Okay, a5. Knight g3. e6, defending that. Okay, bishop h5, attacking the queen. Queen has to move to the only available square. Bishop f7 check. Gives a winning endgame for white. And in this position we went through king h7 to try and protect the knight. What happens if the knight just moves away and the king remains safe for the moment? Well, g4 comes. Pawn takes, and now usually you would expect a move like h5 to happen, but here you just played bishop takes because you're threatening to take the knight, and then the file is completely open. Or you're also threatening to play h5. You can play how you prefer. So if black plays queen to b6, right, you just take this knight. Pawn takes back, and then after rook g1 and bishop h6 is the easiest checkmate pattern in the world. If, let's say, black plays f6 to counterattack and give more luft to the black king. Okay, still take. Take is not good. Taking the bishop in g5 is not good because after the check, if the king moves, you're threatening h4 winning the game, or at least you're also going up the exchange. So after pawn takes in f5, bishop h6. That's it. Obviously taking is a suicide, so after king h7, putting more attack over that, you just swap. Take. Long castle is the killer move. Okay, the last line and then I'll close this video. I really wanted to show this line because it happened in a game against me, and I just wanted to analyze it myself, obviously, but it's actually very strange. It's a bit unusual, although it makes sense. So after knight f6 and bishop e2, black king play e5 already, so this is not really that much of a Caro-Kann now. Okay, well, castle. Now we're not going to look at d4 because, you know, the patterns are the same. Let's look at this, bishop to b4. Attacking the knight, considering that black has double attack with his pawn. Now here, you take. And you're just going on to the endgame with the bishop pair. If your opponent takes you back, black has a strong center, but here, fun enough, you can actually take this. There's a tactic. You're just winning this pawn, central pawn, crucial pawn, you're absolutely winning. See, if black takes you, you take, and now bishop f3. This knight can't move and cannot be defended. If he moves, you go to b7. So here the best move is castle. Bishop takes, knight c6, c3 attacking the bishop, bishop c5, rook to e1. Rook defending the pawn, d3. That's how you carry on. Rook a to d8, attacking our bishop, bishop c4. Knight a5 attacking the bishop, bishop b5. So that doesn't work. Knight has to go back to c6, only move that makes sense. a4, a6, bishop c4. Knight a5 now? No, go back to a2. Do you see? These are patterns, nothing to do with memorization of lines. Bishop to b6, b4, the knight has to go, knight to c6, and now a5. This is how you make progress when your opponent plays computer moves, but you're also playing computer moves. So this is how the most accurate way to continue is. It's not difficult, and personally I couldn't really find a good plan for this game, even though I knew I was winning. When the bishop goes back to a7, now you can go to c4 and you just stay there, protecting this pawn. You're up a pawn and you got the bishop pair. Now here the plan is to play rook a2, rook to e2 to double up with this rook and put more pressure over this pawn. And then you want to play g3, h4, king g2. And black is in Zugzwang very soon.